everybody, today we'll be going through valid parentheses. So given a string S containing some of these characters, determine if the input string is valid. So an input string is valid if the open brackets is closed by the same type of bracket and the open brackets must be closed in the correct order. So let's look at the input and output. So for example, a open bracket is followed by a closed bracket, and that is a valid parenthesis. And for this one, we have the open bracket followed by a closed bracket, and then we have a open square bracket followed by a closed square bracket, and another open curly bracket followed by a closed curly bracket. So this order is in the correct order, so the output is true. For example 3, we have a open bracket followed by a squarish closed bracket, so that is false because the open bracket must be closed by the same type of brackets. Let's look at example 4. So we have an open bracket followed by a open square bracket, and the next one we have a closed bracket, so this is incorrect. So for this to be correct, we would have the third character to be a closed square bracket and then followed by a closing bracket. So for example 5, let's look at it. We have an open curly bracket followed by an open square bracket, and then we have a closing square bracket and followed by a closing curly bracket. So this is a valid parenthesis. So how can we approach this question? So whenever we see this kind of question, which is valid parentheses or open brackets in a correct order, we can use the stack data structure. So let's take a look at how we can use it with example 5. So for example 5, we are given the string of these characters. So the way we do it is we iterate this string, and whenever we see an opening bracket, we will want to push the corresponding closed bracket into the stack. So let's take a look at how we can do so with this example. So given this string, when we see an opening curly bracket, we will push the corresponding closed bracket into the stack. Then we move on to the next character. We see that it's an opening square bracket. Then we will push the corresponding closed bracket into the stack. Then we move on to the next character in the string, and we see that it is a closed bracket. So we need to pop the element in this stack and compare it with this closed bracket. And if they are the same, then we continue the iteration. If they are not the same, that means the order has been violated and we return false. So for this case, we see that it's a closed square bracket, and then we pop this element and they are the same, so we continue the iteration. So in the next iteration, we see that it's a closing curly bracket, and this closing curly bracket, we compare it with the element in the stack and it's the same, so we pop it. And at the end of the iteration, we break out of the loop and we check the stack is empty. If it's empty, we return true, and if it's not empty, we return false. So that's for example 5. Let's take a look at example 4. So for example 4, we see that there's an opening bracket, so we push the corresponding closing bracket into the stack, and then we see again that there's an opening square bracket, so again we push the corresponding closed bracket into the stack. And for the next iteration, we see that there's a closed bracket, so we need to compare it with the top element in the stack. We pop this element and we check that this closed bracket is not equal to this closed square bracket, so we return false. So what this stack helps us to do is to actually maintain the correct order. Let's look at one more example, example 3. we see that there's an opening bracket. So we push the corresponding close bracket in, and then we see that it's a closed square bracket, and we compare it with the top element, and they are not the same, so we return false. So that's how we can approach this. Okay, let's move on to the code. So first we will need a stack data structure. First new stack. And then we will need to traverse the string. So s dot to char array. Then we need to check whether the character is an opening bracket. If it's an opening bracket, we will need to push the corresponding close bracket into the stack. So if C equals to opening bracket, then we will push the corresponding close bracket into the stack. Else, if C equals to opening square bracket, then we will push the corresponding closing square bracket into the stack. And for the last one, if C equals to opening curly bracket, then we'll push the corresponding closing curly bracket into the stack. So for the next step, we need to check is if the stack is empty. So else if stack dot is empty. If the stack is empty, then we will return false. So this is for the case when the string s is equals to a closing bracket. So we check that it's a closing bracket and the stack is empty. So this is invalid because a valid parenthesis should be followed by should start with an opening bracket followed by a closed bracket, like this, for example. So if it's a stack is empty, then we return false. Or the character is not equals to the stack dot pop. So for this case, for example, we pop the stack, we check whether the closing bracket is equals to the top element in the stack. If it's not, then we also return false. Once we break out of the while loop, of the for loop, we return the stack dot is empty. If it's empty, then we return true, else we return false. So let's run the code. And let's submit it. Yeah, so the code works, and this is how you approach the valid parenthesis.